Now, the other clause that the liberals and the statists use to justify this never-ending expansion of federal power is called the Supremacy Clause. And that can be found in Article 6 of the Constitution, and it states that the Constitution and laws of the United States shall be the supreme law of the land. That's the Supremacy Clause. Now, liberals want us to believe that this clause gives the federal government the power to do anything it wants. But that's absurd. It would contradict the 10th Amendment to the Constitution, which states that the power is not delegated to the United States by the Constitution, nor prohibited by it to the states, are reserved to the states respectively, or to the people. And James Madison, the father of the Constitution, its primary author, uses almost identical language as the 10th Amendment in his Federalist Paper number 45, where he writes that the powers delegated by the proposed Constitution to the federal government are few and defined. Those which are to remain in the state governments are numerous and indefinite. And James Madison gives us even more clarity on this point in Federalist Paper number 39, where he writes that the, quote, local or municipal authorities form distinct and independent portions of the supremacy, no more subject within their respective spheres to the general authority than the general authority, that is the federal government, is subject to them within its own sphere. In other words, the federal government is supreme in its own area, in its own sphere, such as when conducting foreign policy or defending the country or negotiating treaties with other countries. In these areas, the federal government is clearly supreme under the Supremacy Clause. The federal government cannot, for example, come in and tell you how to run your household or how to manage your finances, because that would not be in the proper sphere of its authority. It would not be within its jurisdiction. The Constitution sets up a federal government of specific and enumerated powers. Alexander Hamilton, one of the other three authors of the Federalist Papers, explained it this way in Federalist Paper number 28. Hamilton writes, "It may safely be received as an axiom in our political system that state governments will, in all possible contingencies, afford complete security against invasions of the public liberty by the national authority." End quote. In other words, according to Hamilton and according to Madison, the states are sovereign entities, almost like independent countries, except in specific areas that come under the jurisdiction of the national government, such as national defense and so forth. The federal government has no right or authority to trespass into state and local affairs except in areas specified under the Constitution. The federal authority is supreme only where the Constitution says it's supreme. That's what the Supremacy Clause is talking about. To suggest that the Supremacy Clause gives the federal government the authority to do whatever it wants, wherever it wants, which is President Obama's interpretation, would be to contradict not only the 10th Amendment, but also the rest of the Constitution. Actually, Obama just ignores the Constitution completely. For Obama and most Democrats in Congress, the Constitution is just one big inconvenience. It's just a roadblock, a kind of an obstacle for them to get around. And the way they get around the Constitution is mostly just to ignore it, because there's no way you can reconcile what they are doing to the Constitution. So they just ignore it. Now, of course, the entire purpose of the Constitution can be found in the preamble, and its purpose is to secure the blessings of liberty for ourselves and our posterity. Now, have you ever heard Obama mention securing liberty as the primary purpose of our federal government? I haven't. Now, just like Congress, all presidents, including President Obama, solemnly swear to protect and defend the Constitution of the United States. That oath is required in Article 6 of the Constitution. But President Obama has made it clear throughout his political career that he has no allegiance to the Constitution. Zero. When Bret Baier of Fox News asked President Obama about the subversion of the legislative process that occurred when President Obama and the Democrats were passing Obamacare into law, President Obama said, quote, "I don't spend a lot of time worrying about what the procedural rules are." End quote. But we're supposed to be a government of laws, not of men here. That's what makes us free. We are ruled by law. We're not ruled by dictators. That's what makes America different and unique from all the other tyrannies and dictatorships that are out there and that have been out there throughout human history. When he was serving as a state legislator in Illinois, Barack Obama made his hostility to our Constitution even more clear in a radio interview. He called our Constitution deeply flawed. In fact, I'll play that for you here.
Barack Obama, what are your thoughts on the Declaration and Constitution?
You know, I think it's a remarkable document, but I think it is an imperfect document, and I think it is a document that reflects some deep flaws in American culture. Since I think we can say that the Constitution reflected a enormous blind spot in this culture that carries on until this day, and that the framers had that same blind spot.
You know, if you look at the victories and failures of the civil rights movement and its litigation strategy in the court, I think where it succeeded was to vest formal rights in previously dispossessed peoples, so that I would now have the right to vote. I would now be able to sit at a lunch counter and order, and as long as I could pay for it, I'd be okay. But the Supreme Court never ventured into the issues of redistribution of wealth and sort of more basic issues of political and economic justice in the society. And to that extent, as radical as I think people tried to characterize the Warren Court, it wasn't that radical. It didn't break free from the essential constraints that were placed by the Founding Fathers in the Constitution, at least as it's been interpreted, and Warren Court interpreted it in the same way, that generally the Constitution is a charter of negative liberties, says what the states can't do to you, says what the federal government can't do to you, but it doesn't say what the federal government or the state government must do on your behalf.
So Obama's problem with the very liberal Warren Court is that it did not completely break free from the constraints placed on our government by the Constitution. He doesn't want any constraints on government power. He wants to break free of all constitutional restraints on government power. And he's certainly done that as president. President Obama has made it clear that he outright rejects the Constitution. He wants to break free from the restraints that the Constitution places on government power. But restraint on government power is what makes liberty possible. Obama has said that his big problem with the Constitution is that it's a charter of negative liberties, as he calls them. By which he means that the problem with the Constitution is that the Constitution stops the government from doing things to us. He wants to know what government should be doing for us or to us. Obama would like a Constitution that allows the government to do pretty much whatever it wants to us. But that's not liberty. That's tyranny. And that's basically what Obama is trying to set up here. He's trying to replace our constitutional system of government with Obamaism. He wants to control us. He wants to micromanage our lives. And what better way to control us than to seize control of our health care? Instead of us making our decisions about health care, about the kind of medical treatments we're going to receive, he wants bureaucrats. He wants government bureaucrats to make those decisions for us. By the way, do you know who first came up with the idea of a nationalized healthcare system? Well, Adolf Hitler, he wanted a nationalized healthcare system, but he wasn't the first one to come up with that idea. The first one who came up with that idea was Vladimir Lenin. So it was a communist idea. Now, do you think that Vladimir Lenin, a totalitarian dictator, was primarily concerned about providing his people with the best possible health care? Do you think he was really concerned about the health of the citizens? Or do you think his goal was more control of the people? Well, I think we know the answer to that. He wanted total control over the people. He wanted total control over their bodies and their minds. That's what totalitarianism is, and that's what he set up there in the Soviet Union. And what better way to control people than to control their health care? To control whether people get to live or die by either granting or denying the medical treatment that they need.